I'm going to start by asking you to stand up in a moment or raise your virtual hand, because I'd like to just gauge where you're all at on your pricing journey. So firstly, I'd love to ask those of you who feel really confident in their pricing to please stand up or raise your virtual hands. So those of you who feel like you know what customers are willing to pay, you're not leaving money on the table and your pricing's in a good place. Okay. All right. How about those of you who feel like you're making inroads with your pricing, but there's some headroom to improve still? Maybe you've done some experimenting, you're starting to hone in on the right price. Can anyone please stand up? Okay, brilliant. And then finally, please stand up if pricing's a bit of a black box to you. So you're feeling a bit clueless, you don't know where to start, not sure what customers might be willing to pay. Okay, brilliant, thank you. Please sit down. So my intention today is really whichever camp that you're in, I want you to walk away with some specific steps for removing the guesswork and to boost your pricing confidence. Okay, so pricing poorly is one of the top 5 reasons that early ventures fail. But it's so often overlooked or neglected, or it's a lever that everyone's so afraid to touch. So I want you to open your eyes to a very powerful lever in your business to drive growth, and you don't be part of that statistic. So how you price is actually a really powerful sales tool. So a tool for engaging your customers, guiding their buying decisions, nudging their behaviours, and also communicating. So what does your brand say to your audience, and what does your product the same story? I'm Jamie Millar. I founded Untapped Pricing to help scaling tech ventures optimise their approach to pricing. We're a lively bunch of pricing nerds, behavioural psychologists, and design thinkers. We have various acceleration partners for really early stage ventures too. So I teach entrepreneurship at Warwick Business School and pricing strategy at London School of Economics. And my specialism and deep interest in pricing started during my 10 years with eBay. So I built out their pricing analytics function, and I was responsible for setting the fees for selling on their European eBay platforms. So it's a $26 billion business back then, and we priced very strategically to optimize the financial performance, but also nudge customer behaviours. And that's where my interest in the psychology of pricing started, and its role in that customer buying decision-making process. So today I want to start by making the case for why a little effort goes a very long way when it comes to pricing. I want to help you understand the worth or the value of your product and how to price accordingly. And then I'm going to share 3 of our top pricing hacks for improving your approach right away. And then there'll be some time for Q&A at the end. So firstly, I'd like you to think about how much time you and your team put into these 3 growth strategies. So acquisition, retention, and monetization. And it's my hunch that it's quite front-loaded to the first 2. So Price Intelligently recently did a study with 500 SaaS companies that looked at the impact of putting additional effort into each of these strategies. And a 1% return, for an increase of putting an extra 1% effort or resources into acquisition drove a 3.3% return. For monetization, for retention, that was 6.7%, and for monetization, that was 12.7%. So pricing is 4 times as effective in growing revenue and twice as effective in improving retention So give it the time and the attention it deserves. Okay, so I want to introduce you to the pricing thermometer. So whenever we price something, there are two other factors at play. Firstly, your cost to deliver your product at the bottom, then the value it delivers to the customer at the top, and price falls somewhere in between the two. So the difference between your costs and your price is your margin, so that's your incentive to sell. The difference between price and the value is your customer's incentive to buy. But all the time we see businesses where they don't have a tight handle on their costs or the value or both, and that means that price gets set rather arbitrarily in between. And that can lead to some really common problems. So perhaps you're consistently undercharging. Maybe you've underestimated your costs and they're not sufficient to drive a sustainable and scalable business. If you don't understand the value of what you do, how are you going to advocate and convince others of that value? And you might be focusing on the wrong customers entirely. So I hope the exercise of standing or raising your digital hands at the start helped reassure you that pricing is hard. So your counterparts in the room, your peers, your fellow founders, this is a really challenging lever to get right. And many of you are finding that. So often entrepreneurs find themselves guessing what client budgets or having no idea what their prospects are willing to pay, and that's all totally normal. Obviously, your pricing is tied to your financial outlook. So if your runway is tight, there's a lot of pressure as well to close those next deals. So I'd like to focus for a moment on the top of that pricing thermometer. So how do you understand the value of what you're delivering? So I've got 3 principles to share here. And a customer's willingness to pay is rooted in the benefits or the outcomes that your product is realizing for them. So value takes many forms. It might be functional benefits, emotional benefits, social benefits, and you've got to know what they are. And you've got to know how they differ between different customers as well. So what are the tangible benefits of your product or service? What's the measurable stuff? Are you driving more leads, more revenue, more margin, saving them time? But also, what are the intangible benefits? Are you driving peace of mind? Are you driving brand, social kudos, health and well-being, enjoyment? And you need to understand what those benefits are and the relative weight in the decision-making process by your client. So there might be a number of benefits that matter in different ways to different stakeholders in the buying decision. And the other thing to be mindful of is what are their viable alternatives? So you might be thinking about competitors, your competitors, are they popping into your mind? Make sure you know competitors and which competitors are popping into your prospects' minds, but also what else could they be doing? What other alternatives do they have? Maybe building it in-house or outsourcing that build in-house, or maybe they've been working around this problem in a really clunky way for years. So the next thing to think about when it comes to value and understanding value is that it's highly contextual. So if I ask you, what's a pint of beer worth? So the only answer is to whom? Right? Because to the wine lovers amongst you, the answer might be nothing. But to the beer lovers amongst you, the answer still depends on the context. So you might be willing to pay a very hefty premium for a cool beer on a hot day at the only beer stand at a festival. but you'd expect to pay a lot less for that exact same beer from a rundown grocery store. So value isn't an inherent property of a product or service, it's contextual and it's subjective. And so ask yourselves what has gone down in value to your clients recently, and more importantly, what do you do or could you do that's gone up in value to your clients and prospects recently? And then, fortunately, the answer to unlocking this understanding of value is not rocket science. Talk to your customers. And I know for some product-led, very technical founders I've worked with, that does feel a little bit like rocket science. But I strongly recommend this book. So the Mum Test is quite thin, so it's a quick read, you'll blast through it. But it's all about how the art of asking questions in a way that even your mum can't lie to you. So find a way to have a dialogue with your customers or prospects. What do they care about? What's changed? What drives value for them? If they're customers, what would happen if you took your product away? We call this process tripping over the truth from your customers, and you'll find that having these conversations will not only help inform your pricing decisions, but it'll pay dividends in your marketing efforts, your customer development, and also your product roadmap. So here's a further tip. So just quick hands up, who's enterprise selling? Selling into B2B enterprise, okay. B2B non-enterprise, so you're selling into SMBs. Okay, great, and B2C. Okay, so a great mix. So perhaps for those of you who are B2B selling, how many of you are currently sharing an estimate of the upside early in your sales process? Great. Okay, so these are the people to go and talk to in the break to find out more about how they're doing that. So this is the way to avoid writing that £200,000 proposal only to find out they've got a £20,000 budget. This is the way to really understand what it means to them. And it's not as hard as it sounds, but it can really turn that sales conversation on its head. So rather than asking your client quite speculatively, so what's this worth to you in terms of revenue upside, you go into that conversation with your own estimate. So we believe this is worth between 1.2 and 1.5 million in incremental revenue every quarter. Can we run through our assumptions and see if you agree? So that's quite easy to say, but you might be thinking, oh, okay, maybe the benefits of your particular product feel intangible or one step removed, or you're not quite sure. So let me sort of build that out for you. So firstly, the key is make assumptions, sensible assumptions. Layering assumptions on top of each other, that's fine. Just be willing to kind of talk through them. So for an example, let's say that my product does drive incremental revenue for my customers. And previous clients or proof of concept projects have shown that I can drive 10% incremental growth. So my prospects, perhaps it's a small business, and I think their turnover is probably about £1 million. So I know it's worth roughly 100,000 to them. But then we look for some more supporting data points. Maybe I go on Company's House, maybe I see that actually their turnover is more like 10 million. So if I can drive 10% growth, that's worth 1 million. So what can you find out on LinkedIn about the number of employees your prospect might have, from Company's House, from their own website, who they're investing in, from the news? And try and bolster your assumptions. Also look for other ways to validate those assumptions, right? So maybe you've got friendly contacts in that company or in the industry who can strengthen your weakest assumption. Maybe there are questions you can ask in the sales process to give you confidence in this estimate of the upside. And as you do this, please don't jump to conclusions. You wouldn't believe the number of people that say to me, oh, the price looked a bit high, so I just brought it down a bit. Right? Base your understanding of value in the available facts, not in your own biases or assumptions about your prospects. Another useful exercise is understanding their process. So write down all the steps you think they would need to take to work with your company. You might find it turns into a very long list quickly. And I think that's useful for two reasons. So firstly, you might be able to spot ways that you can help them. So how can we help you get this over the line? But also it'll help you see what other factors are at play when they're making their buying decision. It's not just about the price. And this is quite a controversial one sometimes. But let me tell you why I'm advising you never to ask for the budget. So existing budgets are often irrelevant, particularly for very innovative solutions or technologies that benefit cross-sections of an organisation and don't nicely comply with budget lines. Asking for the budget gives away your ability to anchor price perceptions. Right, so imagine if your price is higher than the budget they've just told you, you're in defence mode, you're on the back foot. It's also weakening your ability to base the conversation on the value that's on offer. So rather than ask for the budget, I encourage you to be the first to speak a price and to trust your newly found assessment of value. I think where budgets do exist and they genuinely present a ceiling to the possible spend, it can come up and lead that pricing conversation instead. And all this really builds up to your confidence, which is unlocked in understanding value, whatever your pricing strategy is, whatever the economic backdrop. Okay, so I'm going to share 3 of our top pricing hacks for improving your approach straight away. So the first is to give your customers choices, and ideally not too many choices. So think about, you see this everywhere. So think about in a coffee shop, the small, medium, large, or your bronze, silver, gold, and your SAS tiers. I recommend this whether you are B2B, B2C, enterprise, selling and writing proposals, or publishing your prices on your website. Now 3 is certainly a magic number here, so aim for that good, better, best, or that bronze, silver, gold. And why do I say this? Firstly, customers love choices. You are switching them from a binary, should I buy this or not mindset, to a which should I buy mindset. BidSketch recently did some research and found that adding options to your proposals for customers to choose from generated an additional 32% in revenue. So then you may have underestimated a customer's willingness to pay, or you've presented them with options that they might not have considered. And so it's a real upsell opportunity too. Offering options can really help you guide customer decisions. So particularly if you have immature buyers who aren't used to buying what you do. So you are helping them through that decision-making process. It'll also put you on the front foot if negotiations might follow, because you've clearly laid out how scope changes with price. It also means that you can easily anchor price perceptions. Now, what's the easiest way to sell a £2,000 watch. You put it right next to a £10,000 watch. And it's this common cognitive bias here called anchoring. So we rely too heavily on the available comparisons when we're evaluating a price. So the same goes for you. What's that gold option? How do you price it up considerably? Some people may still go for it because they want the best you've got to offer and they value it accordingly. For others who might go for the lower priced options, it still plays an anchoring role in informing their perceptions of your other prices. And it also means that you can stop guessing willingness to pay if you're feeling like that's what you're doing, because you've laid out a number of choices at different price points, and so you're automatically appealing to a range of budgets and a range of needs. Okay, so hack number 2, experiment with your pricing. I'm afraid to say pricing is not a one-off exercise. It is a fairly constant process. So we've thought about how value is constantly changing, and you need to experiment to find that sweet spot between how much you charge and how much you sell. And if you're thinking how do I get started with that, I've got a couple of thoughts for you. Firstly, tie it back to the first hack. So give them some options to choose from, see which customers are going for. Perhaps you already sell your gold option, so it's time to up your prices or to think of some additional bells and whistles and create a new gold option. But another top tip is to think about the instances where you know or strongly suspect that customers will pay more. And you do know who they are. So where do people bite your hand off without questioning the price? Is it a particular product? Is it a particular sector? Is it when it's really urgent? And there your candidates for starting to experiment with price. And it doesn't have to be complicated. Just track what you're doing, be systematic, and you will learn so much. And final hack. This might sound obvious, but align your pricing with your goals. And so often I see this get out of whack, and your pricing is pulling in a different direction to the rest of the business. So perhaps you are positioning your company as a really premium service, but your pricing is so low that it's you're worryingly cheap. You heard that expression? Worryingly cheap. It's jarring with the brand you're trying to convey. Or maybe you've underpriced one of your services and it's just strangling your capacity to do anything else, but it's not making you enough money. It's not making you enough margin to grow the business. So my advice here is really be clear on where you want to go as a business, and then pricing is here to help you. So let me walk you through an overly simplified but real example. So tech startup, strong start, 2 co-founders. They've got to the point where they have 100 customers and they're charging £10,000 per customer. So their turnover is $1 million, but the delivery is very high touch. So the 2 co-founders are absolutely exhausted. They've got lots of ideas for automation, but they haven't got the time or the capacity to unlock that. So we work through their pricing, there's lots of demand, and we decide to double their prices. So that's too much for some customers, but many are still willing to pay. So they end up losing half of their, which sounds alarming, but remember that the new price point, actually their turnover is flat, but they have relieved 50% of their capacity to invest their time and their energy into those automated or low-touch products. So they're feeling good about that. And then skip forward the next year, and they've got their automated low-touch or no-touch product. They can ramp customer numbers back up again. They're still charging 20,000 per customer, and their revenue has doubled, and they're on that upwards trajectory, which leaves them feeling pretty ecstatic. So my point here is to be clear on your goals as a business and let pricing help you. Right, so if you are early on your journey and landing that next client is everything, it's probably not time to be super aggressive with your prices. If cash flow is a problem, think about how you could rebalance upfront fees with ongoing fees. If some customers are happy with your prices but others really aren't, start offering them options to choose from at different price points. So ask yourselves, where can you be using pricing more tactically? So what do you want to incentivize? Is there something around payment terms or length of contract? How do you signal which products or services you want them to go for? Price is your ally. Okay, so I want to leave a little bit of time for Q&A. So I have one last thing to share with you. If I've piqued your curiosity around the untapped potential of pricing in your business to drive growth, then I've got an easy first step for you. So check out our free pricing scorecard. So this is an online tool to help you assess the health of your approach to pricing. It takes 4 or 5 minutes to answer a series of yes/no questions, and then you receive a personalised report packed with tips and tricks for how to improve. I've hashed some buttons. And there we go. Thank you so much.
So that was brilliant. Thanks. So open up that to the floor. Any questions? Great.
I just wanted to ask in terms of pricing and location. So if you've got a business where, for example, you've got an app, let's say in the UK, America, South Africa, is it a good idea to keep the price constant or make it more contextual in terms of the country that it's being accessed? Because I just don't know if you get that you lose some trust in customers if they see that someone in the UK is maybe paying slightly more than they would be in, let's say, South Africa.
Thank you. Do you want me to sort of replay the question? Okay, so for the online now, the question was around how to price an app for different geographies. Right, so is it fair, and how will customers perceive it if you price differently across markets, or should you keep it the same? And I think that the answer depends on 2 things. So firstly, how does value compare by market? So maybe in the UK, the market's really saturated, and actually there are some competitors you're aware of, and the proposition isn't quite strong. But in the US, it's a totally different case, and you've got your blue ocean, and value is very different. But also it depends on transparency across those markets. So do you expect someone in South Africa to be able to see the products in the UK? So I sort of take those 2 things into consideration to lead you to the right answer.
My question is following. We are working closely with, effectively working with force people about building something that's going to serve them. But we see also some institutions coming down the line, and we also already have some contacts with different clubs and all that. And we don't want to charge our guys that we are working with, and we want to give them that ability to work with us so it makes sense of the business model and things. But we would like to charge it at a later stage the costs. So we are trying to find a solution how we swing this politically, so it would make sense. So would you give us any tips on this? What do you think of this?
Okay, so just so I understand the question and for the online audience,
Yeah,
so you've got some early partners
yes,
that you and line of sight to some later clients,
Yeah.
but you want to price them differently. So how do
yeah,
you do that?
absolutely.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
organizations differently to actually
Yeah.
customer like people that would help us.
Do you think they will have visibility between the two audiences? There
Well,
any overlap?
people speak to each other, so even London is a village, really. So yeah, sooner or later they'll definitely have.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so a couple of ideas for you. So I think it's really important to think about how you price different audiences differently, because the value set might be completely different for them,
Okay.
but also to have three there, like your goal in the short term with these early partners is perhaps different to those long term. It might be about refining the product, refining the proposition, securing those partners, whereas in future it's about profitability and sort of longer term scaling.
Yes.
So I think you should be pricing them differently. So you might want to think about how you frame those early audiences. Is this sort of a beta arrangement or a closed door set of customers, or early bird pricing for the first 100 partners, or have it in some way? So if it is exposed later, then that's fine, you can stand behind it. Or think about how to wrap it differently. So actually, is the product going to be slightly more mature further down the line? And you talk about it in a different way, you call it something else, perhaps so it's not apples to apples.
Thank you. Makes sense.
I've got a couple online as well. So the first one is freemium pricing structures, which sounds like a silly question, but it's a good one, I think.
Yeah, as in
So
what
how
they
to-
are and when to use it?
Yeah, exactly. So as you go into kind of scale mode, getting that
Yes.
traction, proving it out for an MVP.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so just to clarify then what freemium actually means. So this is where you offer a free product or service, and then for a small subset of your customers, you charge a premium to unlock additional functionality or features. And so that can be a really powerful acquisition tool, because you've taken away that pricing barrier, particularly if your business model relies on sort of a certain level of scale or network effects. Now, the art form involved there is figuring out which features to keep back behind the paywall and which to give away for free. And I think just a word of warning there. So freemium was very popular for a long while in the startup space. I think investors are getting more and more conscious of the model, and you need a longer runway, right? Because it's going to take a longer time to pay back. So watch out for which features go where, lots of customer understanding, lots of that talking to your customer-led, not product-led, and just be careful about your runway and how long it's going to take to pay back.
Brilliant. Just on that, in general, how much time do you think should be placed on pricing? I mean, we see hundreds of investor decks, and often it's just almost an afterthought, with lots of this big strategy at the front of brand, and it's not there. It's tough to give a percentage, but in your eyes now, in the investor market, what do you say?
Yeah, so I think you should be thinking about pricing all the time. So give it as much thought as your product, your audience, your sales approach, because it's all interlinked in the customer decision. Right? You've got to develop your pricing and the product in lockstep, because the customer doesn't separate them out. So please don't do it as an afterthought or a one-off exercise.
Any more from the floor? I've got one more.
Yeah, this is much more B2B related than B2C, but I'm seeing more and more recently, mainly amongst younger companies and those in the creative industries, to kind of flip on its head pretty much what everyone's told us since, instead of kind of going in with a price, kind of saying what's what's your, what have you got, and I can tell you what I can do for that. Realistically, that's businesses that have very incremental scalability, such as, creatives and so onwards. But what would be your thoughts on something like that? Because obviously it's quite opposite to the sorts of things you mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. I've worked with lots of creative businesses on their pricing strategy, actually. And I find, so if you take that, okay, you tell us approach, then it's almost the tail wagging the dog. Because if you do that, then you're always trying to retrofit your products or services to their budget, which might be an approach, but then that's going to hinder how scalable your product is and how efficient it is. So I worked with an animation house recently. They were really proud that they had sort of full flexibility. So a corporate client would come along, want an animation, and almost anything was possible. But actually, their customers were overwhelmed by that. They didn't know what they needed. And so kind of moving, like customers want to buy the cake, not the ingredients. So moving to offering them cakes, so the bronze, silver, gold approach really worked for them because they designed what they knew could work well for a client. And that was much easier for them to scale and the team to deliver and customers to really understand. Because you're the expert, right? The customer doesn't know what's best, that's why they're coming to you. So I think if you let them lead it, then that's going to cause problems.
Great, cool.
Your questions?
Yeah, thank you for the information, very useful. We'd like to know what is your approach with discounts?
Oh, nice. Okay, what's my view on discounts? Okay, I think there are please don't just give discounts away for nothing, please. 2 cases where discounts work really well. So firstly, if the scope comes down, so price really is a problem, then you need to reduce the scope at the same time as reducing the price, otherwise you're devaluing your service. Second reason to give a discount would be if there's a quid pro quo of some kind. So there's something in it for you in exchange for that discount, whether it's preferential payment terms, like they pay it all up front, you do it in a quiet period, they generate some seriously qualified leads for you. It doesn't matter what it is, but as long as you're not just giving that discount over and
It's great. I guess the one final one for me actually, it's around pricing formulas.
Okay.
And when's a good time to start to introduce them and not wanting to overcomplicate it?
When's a good time to introduce pricing formulas?
Yeah, even if there is one. So like I've got so many customers, so what you were doing earlier was like a really simple formula. You can also probably get complex quite quickly with model products. Is it good to avoid that for early stage founders, or kind of start building that evidence and building out a model early?
Yeah, I think start accruing the evidence is perfect. So as you begin to experiment, track what you're doing, track what you're observing in terms of reaction to your prices, in terms of your understanding of the upside, whatever you can estimate, and always try to loop back with the customer on that as well. So do that retrospective on how did they determine whether it was successful or not? What did they learn from it?
Brilliant. So feedback is key for the customer.
Yeah.
Jenny, that was brilliant. Thank you so much. Really
Thank
informative.
you.